What else are you hearing from the palace tonight about Princess Catherine's condition, not to mention the timing of this announcement?
For years, royal honors followed a familiar pattern, carefully measured, quietly awarded, and deeply rooted in tradition. But behind palace walls, whispers began spreading about something entirely different. Courtiers reportedly spoke in hushed tones. Senior aides refused to comment. And then came a rumor so astonishing that many dismissed it outright. The crown, it seemed, was preparing to do something never seen before, and at the center of it all stood Catherine. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, it was only a murmur, the kind of palace whisper that usually fades before reaching the public. But this one did not fade. It grew sharper, heavier, more dangerous with every passing day. Something was being prepared, something that made even experienced courtiers choose their words carefully. The Lord Chamberlain's office, usually measured and discreet, was said to be moving with unusual precision, quietly coordinating details that no one outside the highest circle was allowed to understand. And that silence only made the speculation more explosive. Why were senior aides refusing to explain? Why were insiders suddenly speaking of recognition in a tone that sounded less ceremonial and more historic? The answer seemed to point in one direction: Catherine. For years, she had stood at the center of royal storms without demanding the spotlight, absorbing pressure, carrying expectation, and turning duty into something deeply personal. Yet now, the institution appeared ready to acknowledge that her role had become impossible to treat as ordinary. Comparisons began surfacing quietly, not just to modern royal wives, but to generations of women who served the crown with dignity while remaining confined by tradition. Catherine's case felt different, because the rumored honor was not simply about rank, marriage, or public affection. It was about merit. That word alone carried power. Merit suggested she had earned something beyond expectation, beyond title, beyond the carefully written script of palace life. And if the crown was truly preparing to reward that in a way never seen before, then the monarchy was not just honoring Catherine, it was sending a message to everyone inside the royal household. The rules were shifting. The old measurements of loyalty, service, and influence were being quietly rewritten. Public curiosity turned into obsession as palace silence continued. Every denied comment sounded like confirmation. Every closed door seemed to hide a larger truth. And beneath it all was a darker question. If Catherine was about to be elevated in such a dramatic way, who inside the royal circle would feel inspired, and who would feel threatened? Because royal honors are never only about celebration. They are about power, position, and the future. And this honor, if the whispers proved true, would not simply decorate Catherine's name. It would reshape the meaning of royal service itself. But while the public searched for answers, the real story had begun months earlier through a quiet series of decisions that would ultimately lead Catherine to a position no royal wife had ever occupied before. Royal honors are rarely granted overnight. They are earned through years of service, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Yet even by those standards, Catherine's journey appeared extraordinary. What started as a young woman stepping into one of the most scrutinized families in the world had gradually transformed into something far more significant. And as palace insiders began revisiting her record, a stunning picture emerged. Catherine's path had never been simple, even when it looked graceful from the outside. She entered royal life under a pressure few could survive, with every gesture examined, every silence judged, and every step compared against women who had come before her. Yet instead of resisting the weight of the crown, she learned its rhythm. Slowly, carefully, and without demanding applause, she built the kind of presence that cannot be manufactured. It was not loud. It was not reckless. It was steady. And in a family often shaken by headlines, distance, rivalry, and grief, steadiness became a form of power. Behind palace doors, senior officials reportedly began to notice something important. Catherine did not merely attend engagements, she carried them. She brought calm into rooms where tension had already arrived before her. She understood when to speak, when to remain silent, and when silence itself could protect the dignity of the institution. Over the years, as the monarchy faced difficult chapters, Catherine's role appeared to grow from supportive figure to essential anchor. The public saw elegance and duty, but insiders saw endurance. They saw the long preparation, the private discipline, the emotional restraint, and the quiet sacrifices that came with being watched by the world while still expected to remain human. That was why her rising approval mattered so deeply. It was not just popularity, it was trust. And trust, inside a monarchy fighting to remain relevant, is more valuable than jewels, titles, or ceremony. As Catherine took on greater responsibility, the question changed. It was no longer whether she belonged within the royal structure. It was whether the structure itself had underestimated her. That realization carried danger, because once merit becomes impossible to ignore, tradition begins to look incomplete. Palace voices reportedly began framing her record not through rank alone, but through service, impact, and loyalty tested over time. This was where the story sharpened. If Catherine's honors were being considered because of what she had earned, then the crown was preparing to admit something powerful: that bloodline and marriage were no longer the only measures of royal value. Her journey had become proof that quiet strength could become historic influence. Yet the more Catherine's achievements were examined, the more one question echoed through palace corridors. What exactly had convinced the crown to break centuries of precedent? Long before the public heard a single word, a series of confidential meetings reportedly took place behind closed doors. No official schedules mentioned them. No press briefings acknowledged them. Yet, according to insiders, these discussions involved some of the most powerful figures connected to the monarchy. The topic was not a crisis, a scandal, or a succession plan. It was Catherine, and the possibility of granting her honors unlike any seen before. By then, Catherine's record had become impossible to ignore, but recognition at that level was never a simple matter of admiration. Inside the palace, every decision carried weight, and every change threatened to disturb an old balance. Senior advisors reportedly examined the question from every angle. Would such an honor strengthen the crown, or would it expose hidden tensions? Would the public see it as deserved recognition, or would traditionalists accuse the institution of surrendering to modern pressure? These were not small concerns. The monarchy survives on symbolism, and one unprecedented gesture could echo louder than 1,000 official speeches. That was why the Lord Chamberlain's involvement became so significant. His role suggested that the matter had moved beyond private praise and entered the realm of formal royal consequence. It was no longer a casual discussion about Catherine's popularity. It was becoming a structured decision, a calculated step, perhaps even a turning point. Behind the guarded language, two forces seemed to collide: tradition and necessity. Tradition warned that centuries of royal order could not be reshaped without risk. Necessity answered that the crown could no longer afford to ignore the person who had become one of its strongest sources of stability. Catherine had earned trust, not by demanding authority, but by proving she could carry it. Her work, her restraint, and her loyalty had built a case stronger than any public campaign. And as that case was laid before influential palace circles, support reportedly widened. Some saw the honor as a reward, others saw it as a strategy. If the monarchy wanted to show that service mattered, then Catherine was the clearest symbol. If it wanted to prove it could modernize without abandoning dignity, she was the safest face of that message. But still, there was unease. Because once the crown admits that merit can rise above expectation, every other royal role begins to look different. Questions begin. Comparisons begin. Quiet resentments begin. And that may have been the real reason the meetings remained hidden for so long. The decision was not just about what Catherine deserved. It was about what the monarchy was ready to become. As the debate deepened, certainty slowly replaced hesitation. Something historic was moving toward the surface, and the palace could only keep it buried for so long. Then, after months of speculation and internal debate, The moment finally arrived, and what happened next stunned even those who believed they had seen everything royal history could offer. The atmosphere was electric, expectations were high, but few were prepared for what would actually be revealed. When the Lord Chamberlain stepped forward to deliver the announcement, even seasoned royal observers sensed they were witnessing something historic. The words that followed did more than recognize Catherine. They appeared to rewrite the very rules governing how royal honor itself could be awarded. After months of whispers, denials, and tightly controlled silence, the palace finally allowed the truth to surface. What had once been dismissed as impossible was suddenly spoken with official weight, and the effect was immediate. Catherine was not being acknowledged in the ordinary language of duty. She was being elevated through language that carried permanence, gratitude, and consequence. The Lord Chamberlain's announcement framed her service as exceptional, not simply admirable. That distinction mattered. In royal life, words are never accidental. Every phrase is chosen, weighed, and placed with purpose. So when the announcement made clear that Catherine's honors reflected not only her position but her proven contribution, it struck like a bell through the institution. This was not a polite gesture. It was a statement. A message that the crown had watched, measured, and finally decided that her years of loyalty deserved a response unlike anything before. For insiders, the significance was unmistakable. Some reportedly understood at once that a line had been crossed, not in scandal, but in transformation. Catherine had become the symbol of a monarchy willing to reward endurance as power, humility as authority, and service as legacy. The symbolism was enormous. It suggested that the crown was not frozen in old rituals, but capable of recognizing the person who had helped hold its image together when pressure threatened to crack it apart. Public reactions surged because people sensed the emotional weight behind the honor. They saw not merely a title, not merely a ceremonial distinction, but the culmination of years in which Catherine had carried scrutiny without collapse and expectation without bitterness. Yet behind the pride and celebration, a sharper question began forming. If Catherine could be honored in this unprecedented way, what did that reveal about the monarchy's private judgment of everyone else? Honors create comparison. Recognition creates shadows. And when one figure is lifted higher, others are forced to confront where they stand. That was why the announcement felt both triumphant and dangerous. It honored Catherine, but it also exposed the silent mathematics of royal influence. Who had earned trust? Who had lost it? Who had served the crown quietly? And who had complicated its future? As the public celebrated the moment, the palace understood something far more delicate. History had not simply been made. Pressure had been released into every corridor of royal power. But while headlines celebrated the announcement, another story was unfolding quietly behind palace doors. A story involving admiration, surprise, and perhaps even resentment. Royal honors may be presented publicly, but their consequences are often felt privately. As Catherine's unprecedented recognition spread across the world, reactions reportedly varied dramatically behind palace walls. Some viewed the moment as richly deserved, others struggled to hide their surprise. And a few insiders allegedly worried that a new balance of influence was beginning to emerge. The announcement did not simply honor Catherine, it changed the temperature inside the royal household. For those who had watched her endure years of pressure with discipline and restraint, the recognition felt like justice finally arriving after a long silence. Supporters saw it as a powerful correction, a moment when the crown admitted what the public had already sensed, that Catherine had become one of the monarchy's strongest pillars. But not everyone could receive the news without unease. In a family built on order, rank, and carefully protected tradition, any unprecedented honor carries a hidden warning. It tells others that the palace is measuring contribution in a new way, and that measurement can feel dangerous to those who believed their position alone was protection. Traditionalists reportedly worried that Catherine's elevation might open a door that could never fully be closed again. If merit could reshape recognition once, what would stop it from shaping future authority? That question lingered heavily, Because royal power is rarely announced in loud words. It moves through signals, gestures, seating arrangements, ceremonies, access, and trust. Catherine's response, however, remained controlled. She did not turn the moment into a personal victory parade. She allowed the honor to speak for itself, and that restraint only strengthened the impact. The contrast was striking. The more measured she appeared, the more dramatic the reaction around her became. Public fascination deepened as people tried to imagine what was being said in private rooms, around family tables, and among senior advisors who understood the history behind every symbol. Comparisons with previous royal women became unavoidable. Some had sacrificed deeply and waited years for acknowledgement. Others had carried the burden of duty without ever being granted such a defining mark of institutional trust. Catherine's honor, therefore, carried emotional weight beyond ceremony. It suggested that the crown had not only seen her service, but chosen to make it part of the monarchy's future story. And that created a new kind of tension. Admiration from one side, surprise from another, quiet resentment from those who feared being overshadowed. Because inside royal life, recognition is never neutral. It can heal old wounds, but it can also expose them. It can inspire loyalty, but it can also reveal insecurity. And as Catherine's name dominated conversations, the question shifted from whether she deserved the honor to what the honor would now demand from everyone else. As debate intensified, historians and palace veterans began asking an even larger question: whether this honor represented recognition of one individual or the beginning of a completely new royal era. For centuries, royal honors reflected hierarchy, lineage, and carefully guarded tradition. Yet Catherine's recognition appeared to signal something different. Increasingly, observers began suggesting that the monarchy was embracing a new philosophy, one where service, dedication, and measurable contribution carried unprecedented weight. If true, this was not merely an award. It was a declaration about the future of the crown itself. That was why the debate refused to die down. Catherine's honor had touched something deeper than admiration. It had opened a question the monarchy had avoided for generations. Should royal recognition belong only to inherited position, or should it also belong to those who prove, through pressure and sacrifice, that they can protect the institution when it trembles? For many, Catherine became the answer. She represented a form of royal strength that did not depend on command, noise, or entitlement. Her influence had grown because people believed her. In an age where public trust can collapse overnight, credibility had become a royal asset as powerful as any crown jewel. And palace strategists reportedly understood this clearly. The monarchy could not survive on ancient ceremony alone. It needed figures who could make duty feel human, who could hold public confidence while still respecting tradition. Catherine's recognition appeared to join those two worlds, the old and the new, the ceremonial and the personal, the inherited and the earned. That balance was not easy. Some observers argued that tradition was being protected, not broken, because honoring true service only strengthened the meaning of royal duty. Others warned that once the crown began rewarding measurable contributions so visibly, it would invite comparisons that could unsettle the entire royal structure. But perhaps that was the point. A monarchy that refuses to evolve risks becoming distant. A monarchy that evolves too quickly risks losing its soul. Catherine's honors seemed to sit exactly between those dangers, offering a careful but unmistakable signal that the crown was learning to speak a new language without abandoning its old one. Public approval became central to that calculation. Catherine's popularity was not treated as a passing wave. It was seen as proof that the public still wanted the monarchy to matter, but only if it rewarded dignity, loyalty, and visible effort. The honor, therefore, was strategic as much as emotional. It told the world that the institution recognized not only who someone was, but what they had carried. And in that recognition, a new standard began to take shape. Future royals would not simply inherit expectation. They would be measured against example. They would be watched not only for rank but for service. They would be judged not only by ceremony but by trust. And if Catherine had become the symbol of that shift, then the consequences would reach far beyond her own name. And if Catherine's honors represented a new standard, there was one young royal whose future suddenly looked more significant than ever before. History often remembers moments not for what they achieved immediately, but for what they inspired afterward. As analysts examined Catherine's unprecedented recognition, attention began shifting toward the next generation. Could this honor become the foundation of a new royal culture? And could Catherine's example influence how future royals earn their place within the institution? That question gave the announcement a deeper emotional force. Catherine's honor was no longer being discussed only as a personal triumph. It was becoming a blueprint. For younger royals watching from within the shadow of tradition, her rise carried a lesson that was both inspiring and demanding. It suggested that royal life could not be survived by title alone. It required patience, discipline, sacrifice, and the ability to remain steady when the world demanded a reaction. Catherine had shown that influence did not always arrive through command. Sometimes it arrived through consistency, through showing up, through carrying burdens without turning every burden into a spectacle. And that example began to reshape expectations around future leadership. If the monarchy was moving toward a culture where public service mattered as much as inherited rank, then every younger royal would one day be measured against the standard Catherine had quietly built. That was the power of legacy. It does not shout at first. It settles into the institution, changes the language around duty, and becomes the invisible ruler by which others are judged. For future generations, Catherine's recognition could become a warning as much as an inspiration. Honor will not come simply because history places you near the crown. It must be earned in moments of pressure, loyalty, restraint, and emotional courage. Public admiration for Catherine had already begun to evolve into something more permanent. People were no longer just praising her elegance or composure. They were speaking of her as a stabilizing force, a figure whose conduct had given the monarchy a new emotional center. That distinction mattered because the crown's future would depend not only on ceremonies and succession, but on whether people could still believe in the character of those who represented it. Catherine's journey offered a modern answer. She had endured scrutiny, absorbed silence, and transformed personal discipline into public trust. And now, with this unprecedented honor, that trust was being handed forward like a torch. The symbolic meaning was unmistakable. A new generation would inherit not only palaces, titles, and expectations, but also the memory of what Catherine had proven, that dignity under pressure can become history. Yet there was also tension beneath the inspiration, because once a standard is created, it cannot easily be erased. Every future royal would face the same question Catherine had answered through years of quiet strength. Have they truly served, or have they merely stood close to power? Yet the most surprising consequence of the announcement had not emerged from inside the palace at all. It came from the overwhelming response of people around the world. By the time the dust settled, it was clear this was no ordinary royal announcement. What began as a whisper inside palace corridors had transformed into a defining moment for the monarchy. Catherine's unprecedented honors were being discussed not merely as recognition for one royal figure, but as a signal that the crown itself was evolving and perhaps entering its most transformative chapter in generations. What made the moment so remarkable was not simply the honor itself, but the reaction that followed. Across the world, conversations erupted among royal supporters, historians, commentators, and even those who rarely paid attention to the monarchy. People sensed that something larger had happened. This was no longer a story about a ceremony or a title. It had become a story about values. For years, Catherine had built her reputation quietly, often carrying immense expectations while refusing to turn personal challenges into public drama. She had weathered scrutiny, criticism, and relentless attention, yet somehow emerged with something increasingly rare in public life: trust. That trust became the foundation upon which this historic recognition stood. The Crown's decision appeared to send a powerful message that service mattered, sacrifice mattered, and consistency mattered. In a world often obsessed with noise and controversy, Catherine's journey offered the opposite lesson. She had risen not because she demanded recognition, but because she earned it over time. That contrast made her honor feel deeply symbolic. It suggested that the monarchy still believed character could matter more than spectacle. For many observers, that idea carried enormous significance. The institution had spent years navigating uncertainty, criticism, and changing public expectations. Now, through Catherine, it appeared to be presenting a vision of what modern royal service should look like. Yet the questions did not end with celebration. They multiplied. If merit could now influence recognition in unprecedented ways, what would that mean for future generations? Would other royals be evaluated through the same lens? Would service become the defining measure of influence within the institution? And if so, how dramatically might that reshape the royal landscape in years to come? Those questions ensured that Catherine's honor would not fade into history as a single event. Instead, it would continue echoing through conversations about leadership, duty, and the future of the crown. Looking back on her journey, the emotional weight becomes impossible to ignore. The years of preparation, the pressure, the sacrifices, the moments when remaining steady may have been the hardest choice of all. Every step seemed to lead toward this moment, not because it was planned, but because it was earned. That is why many now believe this announcement may eventually be remembered as far more than a royal milestone. It may be remembered as the moment the monarchy chose a new direction, the moment tradition and merit found common ground, and the moment Catherine's story became inseparable from the future of the crown itself. And as the monarchy steps into this uncertain but fascinating new chapter, one question remains unanswered. If the crown can recognize merit in unprecedented ways today, what extraordinary decisions might tomorrow bring? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.